The silent conquest. The great silence begins. The news came through subspace channels like a whisper of death across the stars. The Vanguard Empire, masters of 1,000 worlds and commanders of the galaxy's most feared battle fleets, had surrendered. Not after a long war or devastating battle, but overnight, without a single shot being fired. Their massive warships simply powered down their weapons and transmitted a message across all frequencies. We yield. We submit. We offer no resistance. Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the cramped command center of the UES Defiant, her weathered hands gripping the metal railing as she watched the reports flood in. Her dark eyes reflected the blue glow of the holographic displays showing the galaxy map. Red zones spread like an infection across the star charts, marking worlds that had fallen silent. The Defiant was a small research vessel, built for exploration rather than war, but right now it felt like the loneliest ship in the universe. "Captain, we're receiving another transmission from Earth Command," announced Lieutenant Sarah Morrison from her position at the communications console. Sarah was young, barely 25, with bright green eyes that still held wonder for the stars. Today, those eyes were filled with fear. Elena nodded grimly. "Put it through." The holographic display flickered, and Admiral Torres appeared, his face drawn with exhaustion. Behind him, Elena could see the chaotic bustle of Earth's military headquarters. "Elena, the situation has deteriorated further. The Crystalline Federation surrendered 3 hours ago. The hegemony of worlds followed 30 minutes later. We've lost contact with over 60% of known civilizations." Dr. James Chen looked up from his science station, his usually calm demeanor shaken. James was Elena's oldest friend, a brilliant scientist who had served with her for over a decade. His black hair was streaked with premature gray from years of studying the mysteries of deep space. "Admiral, this doesn't make sense from any tactical standpoint. These civilizations had defensive capabilities that could withstand entire armadas. Why would they surrender to an enemy they haven't even fought?" Admiral Torres shook his head. "We don't know, James. But we do know this. Whatever is causing these surrenders is heading toward Earth. Long-range sensors detect a massive fleet, moving through the outer rim territories. Every world in their path has surrendered before making contact." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. The Defiant was currently stationed near the Kepler Research Station, studying anomalous energy readings in a remote star system. They were directly in the path of whatever was coming. "Orders, Admiral. Return to Earth immediately. We're recalling all human vessels to form a defensive perimeter around the solar system." Torres paused, his expression softening slightly. "Elena, I've known you for 15 years. You've never backed down from a challenge. But this is different. Something is out there that can break the will of entire civilizations without firing a shot. Promise me you'll be careful." Elena straightened her shoulders. At 42, she had seen more of the galaxy than most humans ever would. She had faced down pirates, navigated through stellar anomalies, and once even talked her way out of an execution by hostile aliens through sheer determination. But she had never seen fear like this in the Admiral's eyes. "We'll be careful, sir." Defiant out. The approach of shadows. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in heavy silence. Elena looked around at her crew of 12. They were scientists, explorers, and researchers, not soldiers. Yet they might be among the last free humans in the galaxy, if Earth fell like all the others. "Captain," Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper, "I'm picking up something on long-range sensors. It's massive." Elena moved to the sensor display, her heart sinking as she saw what Sarah had detected. A fleet of ships unlike anything in their databases was approaching their position. The vessels were enormous, each one easily 10 times the size of the Defiant. They moved in perfect formation, their dark hulls seeming to absorb starlight rather than reflect it. "How long until they reach us?" Elena asked. James ran quick calculations on his console. 18 hours at their current speed, but Elena, their energy signatures are strange. I've never seen anything like them. It's as if they're not entirely in our dimension. Elena made a decision that would echo through history. Instead of immediately setting course for Earth, as ordered, She turned to her crew. I need to know what we're dealing with. If we run now, without understanding this threat, Earth might suffer the same fate as every other world. We're going to stay and observe. Lieutenant Morrison looked up from her station, her face pale but determined. Captain, with respect, that could be suicide. If whatever's on those ships can make the Vanguard Empire surrender, then we need to know how they do it, Elena finished. Sarah, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we're conducting reconnaissance and we'll transmit all data as we gather it. If something happens to us, at least Earth will have some warning. Dr. Chen moved to Elena's side. I'm with you, Captain. Science has always been about pushing into the unknown, even when it's dangerous. One by one, the rest of the crew voiced their agreement. They were scared, but they were human, and humans had always faced the dark to bring back light for others. First contact with Fear 16. Hours later, the alien fleet arrived. The Defiant had positioned itself behind a small asteroid, trying to remain hidden while its sensors recorded everything. Elena watched in fascination and growing horror as the alien ships took positions around the system's inhabited planet, Kepler Prime. The planet was home to the Andromedans, a peaceful species of traders and philosophers. Their technology was advanced but focused on art and commerce rather than war. Elena had visited Kepler Prime many times and considered several Andromedans to be friends. They're transmitting something, James reported, his voice tight with concentration. The signal is unlike anything in our databases. It's not just electromagnetic, it seems to be affecting space-time itself on a quantum level. Elena watched as the Andromedan defense satellites powered down one by one. The planetary shields that had protected Kepler Prime for centuries simply disappeared. The orbital defense platforms turned away from the alien fleet and began broadcasting surrender signals. Dear God, Sarah whispered. They're not even fighting. Elena's jaw clenched. Can you analyze that transmission, James? What's causing this? James worked frantically at his console, sweat beading on his forehead. It's some kind of psychic influence, but technologically enhanced. The signal bypasses normal mental defenses and directly impacts the survival instinct. It's creating overwhelming fear and hopelessness in any mind it touches. Why aren't we affected? Elena asked. We're too far away, and the asteroid is providing some shielding. But Captain, if they detect us and focus that signal on the Defiant, Elena understood. They would surrender just like everyone else. The thought made her blood boil. To have their free will stripped away, to be forced into submission without even the chance to fight, was worse than death to her. The Whisper Lords reveal themselves. The alien fleet began landing troops on Kepler Prime. Through their sensors, Elena and her crew watched as tall ethereal beings emerged from the ships. They moved like shadows given form, their bodies seeming to shift and blur at the edges. The Andromedans lined up to welcome them, their eyes empty of hope or defiance. A new transmission reached the Defiant, this one directed specifically at them. Elena felt a chill as a voice spoke directly into their minds, bypassing their communication systems entirely. Small vessel hiding in the shadows. The voice was like ice and starlight, beautiful and terrifying. We are the Whisper Lords, shepherds of silence, bringers of peace through submission. You have observed our work. Come forward and join the harmony of surrender. Elena found herself taking a step toward the communications console, her hand reaching for the surrender beacon. The voice was so reasonable, so persuasive. Why struggle against the inevitable? Why fight when submission would bring peace? But then she heard Sarah gasp in fear, saw James clutching his head in pain, and remembered who she was. Elena Vasquez had never given up on anything in her life. She had fought her way through military academy when instructors said women couldn't handle deep space assignments. She had kept her crew alive through a reactor breach that should have killed them all. She had talked down a Vegan war chief who wanted to execute them for trespassing, using nothing but logic and determination. No, she said aloud, her voice cutting through the psychic influence like a blade. We do not surrender. The response was immediate. The alien voice returned, but now it carried anger instead of false comfort. You resist? Impossible. No species has the will to stand against us. You will kneel. The psychic assault intensified, trying to crush Elena's mind with visions of hopelessness and defeat. She saw Earth burning, her crew dead, herself alone in the dark of space. But for every vision of failure, Elena countered with memories of human achievement. She thought of the first humans to leave Earth, facing the unknown void with nothing but courage. She remembered the colonies that had survived impossible odds, the explorers who had died to map new worlds so others could live. "James, Sarah, everyone!" Elena shouted over the mental storm. "Remember who we are? Remember why we came to the stars." Dr. Chen straightened, his scientific mind asserting itself against the alien influence. "The signal, Captain. It's affecting our neural pathways, but human brain structure is different from other species. We have redundancies, backup systems. We can fight this." Sarah's hands flew over her controls, her military training kicking in. "Shields to maximum. If this is an energy-based attack, maybe we can block it." But Elena had a different idea. If these Whisper Lords fed on fear and submission, then perhaps the one thing they couldn't understand was defiance. She opened a channel to the alien fleet, her voice carrying across space with the full force of human determination. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth ship Defiant. We have received your message, and our answer is no. We will not surrender. We will not submit. We will fight you with every breath in our bodies and every star in our sky." You want to know what humans are? We are the species that looks at the impossible and says, "Watch us." We are the ones who turn fear into fuel and obstacles into stepping stones. Come and take us if you can, but know this: we will make you remember our name. The silence that followed was different from the oppressive quiet the Whisper Lords had brought to other worlds. This was the silence before a storm, the moment when two forces of nature prepared to collide. Elena looked at her crew and saw her own determination reflected in their eyes. They were afraid, but they were human, and humans had always done their best work when the odds were against them. The real battle was about to begin. The human spirit unleashed, the storm breaks. The Whisper Lords' response came not in words but in action. 3 of their massive ships broke formation and began moving toward the Defiant's position, their dark hulls rippling with energy that made space itself seem to bend around them. Elena watched their approach on the main display, her mind racing through tactical options that all seemed hopeless. "Captain, they're accelerating," Sarah reported, her voice steady despite the fear Elena could see in her eyes. "Impact in 47 minutes at current speed." Dr. Chen looked up from his science station, his face grim but determined. "Elena, I think I understand how their psychic weapon works. It's not just fear they're projecting, it's a kind of quantum entanglement with the survival instinct. They're literally rewriting the neural pathways that control fight-or-flight responses, forcing every affected mind to choose flight, or in this case, surrender." Elena nodded, her tactical mind already working on the implications. "But humans are different, why?" "Evolution," James explained, his excitement growing despite their desperate situation. "Every other species we've encountered evolved on worlds with predictable dangers. Humans evolved on Earth, where the climate changed constantly, where natural disasters could strike without warning, where survival meant adapting to anything. Our brains developed redundant systems, multiple pathways for processing fear and making decisions. We're literally built to handle the impossible." "Lieutenant?" Morrison turned from her console, a fierce grin on her young face. "Captain, if they want to test human stubbornness, they picked the right species. My grandmother survived the Chicago Dome collapse by refusing to give up for 6 days trapped under rubble. My grandfather held off Martian dust storms with nothing but a broken atmospheric processor and pure spite. If the Whisper Lords think they can break us, they don't know who they're dealing with." Elena felt a surge of pride in her crew, in her species. "James, can we turn their weapon against them somehow?" "Maybe," he said, his fingers flying over his controls. "If I can isolate the quantum frequency they're using, we might be able to Broadcast human determination the same way they broadcast surrender. But I'll need time, and they'll need to get closer for me to get a proper reading. Elena looked at the approaching ships, now 30 minutes away. Then we give you time. Sarah, plot a course that keeps us just ahead of them. Use the asteroid field to break their line of sight when possible. If they want to catch us, make them work for it. The Defiant's engines roared to life, and the small ship began a deadly game of cat and mouse among the asteroids. Elena had always been proud of her ship's maneuverability, but she had never tested it against opponents like this. The Whisper Lord vessels moved with unnatural grace, sliding between asteroids that should have crushed their massive hulls. They flew. James worked frantically to analyze the alien psychic broadcasts. Elena, this is incredible. They're not just affecting minds, they're creating localized distortions in space-time that amplify negative emotions. But the frequency is so precisely tuned to standard neural patterns that any deviation causes interference. Meaning human neural diversity is their worst nightmare. Every time they try to lock onto our minds, they hit a different configuration, a different way of processing fear and hope. It's like trying to tune a radio to a station that keeps changing frequencies. Elena smiled grimly as she guided the Defiant through a particularly dense cluster of asteroids. Then let's give them something really different to tune into. The turning point, as the chase continued, something unexpected happened. The Defiant's communications array began picking up signals from other ships throughout the galaxy. But these weren't surrender broadcasts or calls for help. They were messages of defiance. Captain, Sarah's voice was filled with wonder. I'm receiving transmissions from 17 different star systems. Ships that had gone silent are coming back online. They say they heard your message to the Whisper Lords and it's given them the strength to resist. Elena's heart soared as the reports came in. A Vegan battlecruiser had broken free from the psychic influence and was engaging Whisper Lord forces. A group of Andromedan traders had sabotaged the occupation forces on their homeworld. Even members of the supposedly conquered Vanguard Empire were rising up against their new masters. It's spreading, James said in amazement. The resistance is spreading faster than the conquest did. Elena, what you did, standing up to them publicly, it's becoming a rallying cry across the galaxy. But their celebration was cut short as the Whisper Lord ships finally cornered them in a dead-end canyon of asteroids. The three massive vessels formed a triangle around the Defiant, their hulls pulsing with malevolent energy. The psychic assault came with devastating force. Elena felt her mind reeling under the attack, visions of failure and death flooding her consciousness. She saw Earth burning, her crew broken and defeated, humanity extinct. But then she heard something that changed everything. The voices of her crew. Remember the Armstrong colony? Dr. Chen was saying, his voice cutting through the mental storm. 50 families who refused to abandon a dying world and found a way to terraform it with nothing but determination and recycled scraps. Remember the Luna City uprising? Sarah added, her pilot training helping her focus through the attack. When the corporate council tried to enslave the moon colonists, and they fought back with mining equipment and homemade weapons. Elena realized what was happening. Her crew wasn't just resisting the Whisper Lord's weapon. They were turning it into something else entirely. Every human story of perseverance, every tale of impossible odds overcome, was becoming a weapon against despair. That's it, she breathed, then raised her voice. James, can you broadcast our thoughts the same way they broadcast theirs? I think so, but Elena, that would leave us completely exposed to their attack. Elena looked around at her crew, seeing the same determination in their eyes that had carried humanity from caves to stars. Then we better make it count. Everyone, think about why we came to space. Think about every human who ever looked at the impossible and decided to do it anyway. The battle for Will James's fingers flew over his console, jury-rigging the Defiant's communications array to work in reverse. Instead of receiving the Whisper Lord's psychic broadcasts, they would transmit their own. Ready, Captain, but this is going to hurt. Elena nodded and opened her mind completely, letting every memory of human courage flow through her. She thought of the first astronauts, climbing into primitive rockets to touch the stars. She remembered the colonists who had traveled for decades in cold sleep to reach new worlds. She saw in her mind every human who had ever stood up to bullies, every scientist who had pursued truth despite ridicule, every ordinary person who had done extraordinary things simply because it was right. The effect was immediate and explosive. The human memories and emotions, broadcast on the same quantum frequency the Whisper Lords used for their weapon, struck the alien ships like a physical force. Elena could feel the aliens' confusion and growing fear as they encountered something completely outside their experience, a species that grew stronger when faced with hopelessness. "It's working!" Sarah shouted over the energy discharge crackling around them. Their ships are falling back. But the Whisper Lords weren't finished. The largest of their vessels, a ship so massive it dwarfed entire space stations, began to glow, with power that made nearby asteroids crack from the energy release. A new voice reached the defiant, ancient and terrible. "Impossible insects," it hissed. "We have shepherded 1,000 galaxies into silence. We have brought peace to countless species through submission. You will not undo our work." Elena felt the full weight of the Whisper Lord's attention focus on her ship. The psychic assault was like nothing she had ever experienced, a storm of despair and hopelessness that sought to crush not just her will but her very sense of self. She saw herself as the aliens wanted her to see herself. Tiny, insignificant, doomed to failure. But then she heard something that the Whisper Lords couldn't understand: laughter. Dr. Chen was actually laughing as he worked at his console. "You know what's funny?" he said, his voice carrying clearly through the psychic storm. "They think this is supposed to discourage us. They're showing us how small we are, how hopeless our situation is, how impossible our chances are. They don't realize that's exactly the kind of challenge humans live for." Elena felt her own laughter bubbling up. "Sarah, remember when we had to navigate the Magellan Nebula with nothing but a broken compass and dead reckoning? Or when we had to repair the life support system using parts from a coffee machine?" Sarah replied, grinning despite the energy cascading around them. "Or when I had to calculate jump coordinates in my head because the computer was offline," James added. Each memory, each shared experience of overcoming impossible odds, struck the Whisper Lords like a physical blow. Elena realized that they had built their empire on a fundamental misunderstanding of what intelligent life could be. They assumed all species were like them, that fear and despair were universal constants. They had never encountered a species that had been forged in the crucible of a world that constantly tried to kill them, that had learned to find joy in struggle and strength in adversity. The tide turns. The psychological battle reached its crescendo as Elena made a decision that would be remembered throughout galactic history. Instead of trying to defend against the Whisper Lord's attack, she embraced it, opened her mind completely to their weapon, and let them see what they were really fighting. The aliens found themselves experiencing human history through Elena's consciousness. They felt the determination of early humans leaving Africa to populate the world, the courage of explorers crossing dangerous oceans, the defiance of those who refused to accept that certain knowledge was forbidden. They experienced the horror and wonder of humans discovering they were not alone in the universe and the immediate desire to go out and meet their neighbors. "You don't understand," Elena said, her voice carrying across space to every Whisper Lord ship. "You think fear makes species weak, that struggle makes them vulnerable. But you're wrong. Every challenge we've faced has made us stronger. Every impossible situation has taught us something new. Every time someone told us we couldn't do something, we found a way to do it better." The effect on the Whisper Lords was catastrophic. Their entire worldview, their understanding of how consciousness worked, crumbled in the face of human experience. Ships that had conquered entire star systems began to retreat, their crews unable to comprehend a species that grew stronger under pressure. But more importantly, Elena's broadcast was being picked up by every species in the galaxy. The human experience of turning adversity into strength, of finding hope in hopelessness, began to resonate with minds that had been forced into submission. The Whisper Lord's psychic network, designed to spread surrender, instead became a conduit for resistance. Victory and new dawn. The rebellion that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Species that had surrendered without firing. A shot suddenly found the courage to fight. The Vegan Empire rebuilt its fleets overnight. The Andromedan traders organized guerrilla networks. Even the peaceful philosophers of the Crystalline Federation took up arms to defend their freedom. The Whisper Lords, faced with a galaxy in open revolt and the growing influence of human determination, made a tactical withdrawal to regroup. But the damage to their empire was irreversible. They had shown that they could be defeated, that their weapon of despair had a weakness: hope. Elena stood on the bridge of the Defiant as they finally set course for Earth, watching the stars that no longer seemed dark and threatening but full of potential and alliance. Her crew worked around her, already planning for the conferences and meetings that would rebuild galactic civilization on new principles. "Captain," Dr. Chen said, looking up from a data stream filled with messages from across the galaxy. "You realize what we've done, don't you? We haven't just defeated the Whisper Lords. We've given the galaxy something it never had before. Proof that any challenge can be overcome if you refuse to give up." Elena nodded, thinking of all the species that were now looking to humanity not as weaklings from a small planet, but as the people who had shown them how to be strong. "James, I think this is just the beginning. The galaxy is going to need rebuilding, and humans are pretty good at building things." Lieutenant Morrison laughed from her pilot station. "Captain, my grandmother always said that humans don't know when to quit. I think she meant it as a criticism." Elena smiled as Earth appeared on their long-range sensors, blue and beautiful, and free. "Sarah, I think she meant it as a compliment. We just didn't know it yet." The UES Defiant continued toward home, carrying news of victory and the promise of a new era. Behind them, the galaxy awakened from its brief nightmare of submission, each species finding in themselves the spark of human determination that said no to tyranny and yes to the infinite possibilities of freedom. Humanity had not only saved themselves, they had saved the galaxy by teaching it the most important lesson they had learned on their harsh home world: that the darkness is always darkest just before the dawn, and dawn always comes to those who refuse to stop looking for it. The stars themselves seemed to burn brighter, as if reflecting the light of hope that now spread from world to world, carrying a simple message that resonated across every inhabited system. Never give up. Never surrender. Never stop being human.